The crystal vase shattered against the marble floor, sending fragments across the pristine hallway like deadly stars. Maria Santos grabbed her cleaning cart and ran. Another maid who couldn't last even 3 days working for the most feared billionaire in the city. Dorian Alston stood in his mansion's doorway, his steel-gray eyes watching her flee through the iron gates. His jaw tightened as he turned back into the house that felt more like a prison than a home. 37 years old, worth $12 billion, and he couldn't keep a single employee for more than a week. The silence in his mansion was deafening. 15,000 square feet of cold marble, empty rooms, and echoing footsteps. The only sounds came from the grandfather clock in the main hall, ticking away the hours of his lonely existence. Staff whispered he was cursed by his own bitterness, though none dared say it where he might hear. But they didn't know the truth. They didn't know about the woman who'd torn his heart apart 5 years ago, leaving him with nothing but money and the bitter lesson that everyone had a price. Trust was a luxury he could no longer afford. What would you do if you had all the money in the world, but nobody who genuinely cared about you? Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. 3 days later, Dorian's assistant called with news that made his stomach clench. Sir, we found someone willing to take the position. She starts Monday morning. How long do you think this one will last? Dorian asked, staring out his office window at the city below. Her name is Selena Marrow. 26 years old. Excellent references. She's different from the others, sir. Different. Dorian had heard that before. They were all different until they met him face to face, until they felt the weight of his anger and disappointment. Then they all became the same. Another person running away from the man who had everything except what mattered most. Monday morning arrived with autumn rain pelting against the mansion's windows. Dorian watched from his study as a taxi pulled up to his gates. A young woman stepped out, not bothering with an umbrella as she walked through the downpour. Her dark hair was soaked by the time she reached the front door, but her shoulders remained straight, her pace steady. The butler, Harrison, had briefed the new staff as he always did. Don't speak unless spoken to. Don't make eye contact. Don't question Mr. Alston's decisions. Most importantly, don't expect to last long. But as Selena Marrow stood in the mansion's grand entrance, water dripping from her simple blue dress onto the imported Italian marble, something felt different about this one. She looked around the opulent space with curious eyes rather than intimidated ones, taking in the crystal chandeliers, the sweeping staircase, the paintings worth more than most people's houses. Impressive, she said quietly to Harrison, but it feels so empty. Harrison's eyes widened. In 12 years of working for Dorian, no employee had ever commented on the emotional atmosphere of the house. They were too busy being terrified. Dorian heard voices downstairs and decided to make his usual first impression. He descended the marble staircase with deliberate slowness, his expensive shoes clicking against each step. The sound usually made new employees shrink back in fear. His presence filled rooms like a storm cloud, dark and threatening. But when Selena turned to face him, she didn't step backward. She didn't lower her gaze. Instead, she met his eyes with a steady look that seemed to see right through him. Mr. Alston, she said with a slight nod. I'm Selena Marrow, your new housekeeper. Her voice was calm, respectful, but not fearful. Dorian found himself studying her face. The gentle curve of her cheekbones, the determined set of her jaw, the way her brown eyes held his without wavering. When was the last time someone had looked at him like that? Like he was human instead of a monster? Follow me, he said curtly, turning toward his study. We need to discuss your duties. As they walked through the mansion's long corridors, Dorian began his usual intimidation routine. I expect perfection in everything. I don't tolerate mistakes, excuses, or questions. The last maid lasted 3 days before she realized she wasn't cut out for this position. What happened to her? Selena asked. Dorian stopped walking. Excuse me? I asked what happened to her. Did you fire her? Or did she quit? The audacity of the question should have infuriated him. No employee had ever dared ask him such a direct question on their first day. But instead of anger, Dorian felt something unexpected, curiosity. She broke a vase and ran away, he admitted. Was an expensive vase. Very. Then I understand why she was frightened. But accidents happen, Mr. Alston, even in the most careful hands. They reached his study, and Dorian turned to face her fully. This woman was either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish. In his experience, there wasn't much difference between the two. Are you suggesting I was too harsh? He asked, his voice carrying the dangerous edge that usually made people stammer apologies. Selina considered this for a moment. I'm suggesting that fear makes people clumsy, and clumsiness creates more accidents. The simple logic of her statement hit him like a physical blow. How many employees had he lost because his anger made them too nervous to do their jobs properly? How many mistakes had he caused by creating an atmosphere of terror in his own home? For the first time in years, Dorian Alston found himself speechless. But as he stared into Selina's calm, intelligent eyes, one question burned in his mind that would change everything. Who was this woman who dared to challenge a billionaire on her first day? And why wasn't she afraid of him? The antique lamp crashed to the floor at 6:47 a.m., its glass shade exploding into 1,000 pieces across Dorian's bedroom carpet. He bolted upright, his heart hammering against his ribs as another nightmare about betrayal faded into the gray morning light. Sir, Selina's voice came from the hallway, followed by a gentle knock. Are you all right? Dorian's jaw clenched. 3 weeks she'd been working here, and she still hadn't learned to mind her own business. Every other employee would have pretended they heard nothing, too terrified to acknowledge their boss might be human enough to have bad dreams. Go away, he barked, stepping carefully around the broken glass in his bare feet. But instead of footsteps retreating down the hall, he heard something that made his blood freeze. Selina was humming, actually humming a soft melody as she waited outside his door. I said, go away. The humming stopped. The coffee's ready downstairs when you are, Mr. Alston. And I've swept up most of the glass from yesterday's incident in the dining room. Yesterday's incident. That's what she called it when he'd thrown his dinner plate against the wall after receiving news that his biggest competitor had stolen another major client. Any other employee would have called it a violent outburst. But Selina treated his rage like a thunderstorm, something natural that passed without leaving permanent damage. He dressed quickly and headed downstairs, expecting to find her cowering in the kitchen like the others always did after witnessing his temper. Instead, he found her in his study, dusting the bookshelves with careful precision. What are you doing in here? His voice cut through the morning silence like a blade. Selina turned calmly, meeting his glare with those steady brown eyes that seemed to see everything. Cleaning, sir? The books were gathering dust. I didn't give you permission to enter my private study. You didn't forbid it either. She continued dusting, her movements graceful and unhurried. These are beautiful books. Do you read them? The question hit him like a physical blow. When was the last time he'd read anything except business reports and legal documents? When had he stopped caring about the stories that once transported him to different worlds? Have you ever noticed how the people who challenge us the most are often the ones we need most in our lives? That's none of your business, he snapped, but his anger felt hollow even to his own ears. Of course not, she agreed pleasantly. I was just wondering if you'd recommend any. I love to read, but I can't afford many books on my salary. Dorian stared at her, completely thrown off balance. She'd just admitted to being poor, something that usually made people ashamed or defensive around him. But Selina said it like it was simply a fact, no more embarrassing than mentioning the weather. Why aren't you afraid of me? The question escaped before he could stop it. Selina paused in her dusting, considering his words carefully. Should I be? Everyone else is. Everyone else hasn't taken the time to really look at you. And what exactly do you see when you look at me? She set down her dust cloth and faced him fully. I see a man who's forgotten how to trust. I see someone who's built walls so high he's trapped himself inside them. And I see pain that's been festering for so long it's turned into anger. The accuracy of her observation stole the breath from his lungs. How could she see through him so easily when he'd spent years perfecting his armor? You don't know anything about me, he said, but his voice lacked its usual bite. I know you have nightmares. I know you throw things when you're hurt instead of angry. And I know you haven't smiled genuinely in a very long time. Dorian's hands clenched into fists at his sides. Get out. Of course, sir. Selina gathered her cleaning supplies with the same calm efficiency she'd shown from day one. But as she reached the study door, she paused. Mr. Alston? What? The lamp in your bedroom. I can replace it if you'd like. I know where to find one exactly like it. He frowned. How could you possibly know that? Because I broke the same lamp in my grandmother's house when I was 12. I was so afraid of disappointing her that I saved up for 3 months to buy a replacement. She never even noticed it was gone. Why are you telling me this? Selina's smile was soft and understanding. Because sometimes we break things when we're hurting, and sometimes the breaking is just as important as the fixing. She left him standing in his study, surrounded by dusty books and the lingering scent of her perfume. For the first time in 5 years, Dorian found himself wondering if maybe, just maybe, he'd been wrong about everyone having a price. But as he picked up one of his old novels, a story about love conquering impossible odds, one thought terrified him more than any business deal ever had. What if Selina Merrow was the one person who couldn't be bought, and what if that meant she could destroy him completely? The dining room erupted in chaos as Dorian swept his arm across the mahogany table, sending china plates crashing to the floor in a symphony of destruction. His latest business meeting had been a disaster, and now $12,000 worth of antique dinnerware lay shattered at his feet. Sir! Harrison rushed into the room, his face pale with panic. The Pemberton china said. I don't care if it belonged to Napoleon himself, Dorian snarled, his chest heaving with fury. Get someone to clean up this mess. But before Harrison could summon the usual terrified cleaning crew, Selina appeared in the doorway. She took in the scene of destruction with those calm eyes, then did something that made everyone in the room freeze. She started picking up the broken pieces. What are you doing? Dorian demanded. Cleaning, she said simply, as if kneeling on the floor, gathering fragments of priceless china was the most natural thing in the world. I didn't tell you to clean it. No, but someone has to. She held up a shard that caught the light like a jewel. This plate is beautiful. What made you want to destroy it? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Harrison and the other staff members exchanged terrified glances, waiting for their boss to explode at such audacity. Instead, Dorian found himself staring at this woman who treated his rage like a puzzle to be solved rather than a storm to be weathered. You want to know what made me destroy it? His voice was dangerously quiet. Marcus Pemberton just stole a $20 million contract from me using information only 3 people in my company had access to. Someone I trusted sold me out. Selina continued gathering the broken china, her movements careful and methodical. So you destroyed something beautiful because someone else destroyed your trust. Don't psychoanalyze me. I'm not. I'm just wondering if the plate deserved to pay for someone else's betrayal. The simple logic of her words hit him like a slap. How many beautiful things had he destroyed over the years because of his anger? How much had he ruined because he couldn't separate his pain from his surroundings? When was the last time someone made you question your actions without making you feel attacked? You have no idea what betrayal feels like, he said, but his anger was already cooling. Selina looked up at him from where she knelt among the wreckage. My fiancé left me at the altar 2 years ago. He said I wasn't sophisticated enough for his new promotion, that I embarrassed him in front of his colleagues. He took the ring, the apartment we'd picked out together, and the dog-eyed raised from puppy. Dorian felt something shift in his chest. Why are you telling me this? Because I understand what it feels like when someone you love makes you feel worthless. But I learned something important from that experience. She stood, cradling the broken pieces in her apron. Destroying beautiful things doesn't heal the hurt. It just creates more destruction. So what does heal it? Building something better. Harrison cleared his throat nervously. Sir, perhaps I should. Stay, Dorian commanded, his eyes never leaving Selina's face. What kind of something better? Trust that's earned instead of given. Relationships built on respect instead of fear. A home filled with warmth instead of anger. That's a fairy tale. Maybe. But what's the alternative? Living alone in a beautiful mansion, surrounded by broken things and people too scared to care about you. The accuracy of her description made his throat tighten. When had his life become so perfectly miserable? You think I'm pathetic, he said. I think you're human, and I think you're tired of being angry all the time. She was right. God help him. She was absolutely right. The rage that had sustained him for 5 years felt exhausting now, like carrying a weight that served no purpose except to remind him of old wounds. The staff meeting is in an hour, he said abruptly. I want you there. Harrison's eyes widened. Sir, she's just the what, Harrison? Dorian's voice carried a warning that made the butler step back. Nothing, sir. Of course she'll attend. As the other staff scattered to prepare for the meeting, Selina remained behind, still holding the broken china. Mr. Alston? What? This china can be repaired. It won't look exactly the same, but sometimes the mended pieces are stronger than the original. She left him standing in the ruins of his dining room, holding onto her words like a lifeline he hadn't known he needed. But as staff members whispered in the hallways about their boss's strange new fascination with the fearless maid, none of them noticed the figure watching from the garden outside. Someone from Dorian's past who had been waiting 5 long years for the perfect moment to return and finish what they'd started. The photograph slipped from Dorian's hands like a ghost returning to haunt him. It fluttered to the floor of his study, landing face up, an image of a younger, happier version of himself standing beside a woman with platinum blonde hair and a smile that had once made him believe in forever. Victoria Sterling. The name still tasted like poison in his mouth. Sir, Selina's voice came from the doorway, soft and concerned. You look like you've seen a ghost. He had. The ghost of the man he used to be before betrayal had carved out his heart and left him hollow. Get out, he whispered, but there was no force behind the words. Instead of leaving, Selina stepped into the room and saw the photograph at his feet. She didn't pick it up, didn't ask questions, didn't push for information he wasn't ready to give. She simply stood there, offering her quiet presence like an anchor in a storm. She was beautiful, Selina said finally. Dorian's laugh was bitter as winter wind. Beautiful on the outside, rotten to the core. What happened? The question he'd been avoiding for 5 years hung between them. No one had ever dared ask him directly about Victoria. His staff knew better. His business associates pretended it never happened, and he made sure every trace of her had been erased from his life. Except for this one photograph he kept hidden in his desk drawer like a reminder of his own stupidity. She destroyed me, he said simply. Selina moved closer, her footsteps soft on the Persian rug. Ow! The story poured out of him like blood from a reopened wound. How Victoria had been the daughter of his business mentor. How she'd pursued him with determination that felt like love. How he'd proposed after 2 years of what he thought was the deepest connection he'd ever experienced. I gave her everything, he continued, his voice hollow. Access to my accounts, my business plans, my security codes. I trusted her with information that could have destroyed my entire empire. Have you ever trusted someone so completely that losing them felt like losing yourself? And she used it against you. 2 weeks before our wedding, I discovered she'd been selling my business secrets to Marcus Pemberton for over a year. Every major deal I'd lost, every client who'd mysteriously chosen my competition over me. It was all her. Selina's face showed no shock, no pity, just deep understanding. She wasn't just stealing your business. She was stealing your ability to trust. When I confronted her, do you know what she said? His hands clenched into fists as the memory crashed over him. Did you really think someone like me could love someone like you for anything other than money? The words still had the power to cut him to the bone. Victoria had made him feel like his wealth was the only thing about him worth wanting. She was wrong. Dorian looked up sharply. What? She was wrong about you. Anyone who spends 5 minutes in your presence can see there's so much more to you than money. Like what? Selina knelt and picked up the photograph, studying it with thoughtful eyes. You're brilliant. You see solutions where others see problems. You care deeply about things, even if you try to hide it. And you have the capacity for incredible loyalty. She just wasn't worthy of it. How can you possibly know that? Because of how you treat your staff when you think no one's watching. Because you remember everyone's names, their birthdays, their families. Because you've been hurt so badly you've forgotten how to show kindness, but you've never forgotten how to feel it. Her words cracked something open in his chest that had been frozen for years. Victoria taught me that everyone has a price, he said quietly. Everyone can be bought. Everyone will betray you if the offer is right. What's my price then? The question caught him off guard. What? If everyone can be bought, what would it take to buy me? Dorian studied her face, looking for the calculation he'd learned to recognize in everyone around him. But all he saw was genuine curiosity. Money, obviously. A better position, a bigger house, security for your future. Wrong. She set the photograph on his desk with gentle care. You can't buy loyalty with money, Mr. Alston. You earn it with respect. You can't purchase trust with gifts. You build it with consistency. And you can't buy love at all. It's either freely given or it doesn't exist. That's naive. Maybe. Or maybe you've been surrounded by the wrong people for so long you've forgotten what the right ones look like. She moved toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, I think Victoria Sterling was the biggest fool in the world. She had access to something far more valuable than your business secrets. What's that? Your heart. After she left, Dorian sat alone with the photograph of his former self. Young, trusting, believing in happy endings. That man felt like a stranger now. But as he heard Selena's laughter drifting up from the kitchen where she was helping prepare dinner, he felt something he hadn't experienced in 5 years. The faintest flutter of hope. Outside his window, a black sedan pulled away from the mansion's gates. Inside, Victoria Sterling lowered her binoculars and smiled the same predatory smile that had once fooled him into thinking it meant love. She'd been watching, waiting, learning about his new weakness. And now she was ready to use Selena Marrow to destroy Dorian Alston once and for all. The power died at 11:43 p.m., plunging Dorian's mansion into absolute darkness just as the storm reached its peak fury outside. Thunder crashed like artillery fire, while lightning illuminated the windows in brief, violent flashes that made the shadows dance like living things. Dorian was still awake in his study, going over contracts by lamplight, when everything went black. Damn, he muttered, feeling around his desk for the emergency flashlight he kept in the top drawer. But as his fingers closed around the metal cylinder, he heard something that made him freeze. Singing. Someone was singing in the darkness, their voice soft and melodic, turning the terrifying storm into something almost peaceful. He followed the sound through the hallways, using his phone's flashlight to navigate the familiar corridors that seemed foreign in the blackness. He found Selena in the main hall, lighting candles with the calm efficiency of someone who'd weathered many storms. She was humming an old song his mother used to sing, something about finding light in the darkest hours. "Aren't you afraid?" he asked, his voice echoing in the vast space. She turned, her face glowing in the candlelight like something from a Renaissance painting. Of the storm? No, it's just nature reminding us how small we are. The generator should kick in soon. Maybe, but isn't this nicer? She gestured to the candles she'd placed throughout the hall, their warm light creating an intimacy his mansion had never known. Sometimes we need the power to go out to remember what light really looks like. Dorian found himself moving closer, drawn by something he couldn't name. In the candlelight, without the harsh electric bulbs that usually illuminated every corner of his life, everything felt different. Softer, more real. "You're not like other people," he said. "How so?" "Other people want things from me. Money, connections, opportunities. You just exist. Like you don't need anything from anyone." Selena set down the match she'd been holding and looked at him with those eyes that seemed to see straight through to his soul. "Everyone needs things, Mr. Alston. I need a roof over my head, food to eat, meaningful work to do. But I don't need those things from you specifically. Then why are you here?" "Because you need me." The simple honesty of her answer hit him like a physical blow. When was the last time someone had stayed in his life because he needed them, not because of what he could give them? The storm raged outside, rattling the windows and making the candle flames flicker. But inside this circle of light, Dorian felt something he'd forgotten existed. Peace. "Tell me about your nightmares," Selena said softly. He should have been offended by the presumption, should have retreated behind his walls of anger and pride. "Can you? Can you explain why you've been photographed with my ex-fiancé? Can you explain why you're meeting with reporters and business rivals? Can you explain why I was stupid enough to trust another lying, scheming?" "Stop." Selena's voice cut through his rising fury like a blade. "Just stop and listen to me. Listen to more lies. Listen to the truth you're too hurt to hear." She set down the tea service and faced him fully, her chin raised with the same dignity she'd shown from the first day. Even caught in what looked like betrayal, she refused to cower. "Victoria approached me 6 weeks ago. She offered me $50,000 to spy on you, to report your business dealings, to find your weaknesses." Dorian's heart shattered like glass. "And you took the deal?" "No, I told her to go to hell." The simple statement stopped his rage in its tracks. "What?" "I told her that anyone who would pay someone to betray the man they once claimed to love was beneath contempt. I told her that you deserved better than the poison she was selling. Have you ever realized that sometimes the truth looks exactly like a lie until you hear the whole story? Then explain the photographs." Selena reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a small recording device. "I recorded every conversation, every meeting where she tried to bribe me, threaten me, or convince me to hurt you. I've been gathering evidence of her harassment for weeks." Dorian stared at the device like it might explode. "What?" "Because she's been stalking you for months. Because she's been sabotaging your business deals through other people. Because she's obsessed with destroying you completely. And I knew she wouldn't stop until someone stopped her." The world tilted on its axis. "You were protecting me. I was protecting us. All of us. Every person who works in this house and cares about you, despite your best efforts to push us away." Dorian felt something crack open in his chest. Not the painful breaking he'd experienced with Victoria, but something warm and overwhelming. Hope mixed with terror in equal measure. "Play it," he whispered. Selena pressed the button, and Victoria's voice filled the room with venom disguised as sweetness. $50,000 to start, Selena. More if you can get his business plans. Even more if you can break his heart the way he broke mine." "He didn't break your heart," came Selena's voice, steady and fierce. "You sold it for profit and blamed him when you felt empty afterward. That man destroyed my life. That man loved you, and you turned his love into a weapon against him. If you think I'm going to help you finish what you started, you're insane." Dorian closed his eyes, overwhelmed by the sound of someone defending him when he wasn't there to defend himself. "There's more," Selena said quietly. "Hours of recordings. She's been paying people in your company to leak information. Maybe that's what this situation needs." "Dorian, listen to yourself. You're talking about becoming the monster again." He spun to face her, his eyes blazing with the old familiar fire. That monster protected himself. That monster never let anyone get close enough to hurt the people he cared about. That monster was alone and miserable. That monster's family was never threatened. The words hung between them like a blade. Selena stepped back, seeing something in her husband's face that she hadn't seen since their early days together. The cold calculation of a man who trusted no one and showed no mercy. "You're scared," she said softly. "And when you're scared, you get angry. And when you get angry, you make decisions that hurt everyone around you." "I'm not scared. I'm furious." "You're terrified. You're terrified that you can't protect us. You're terrified that loving us has made you weak. You're terrified that caring about people gives them power to hurt you." Her accuracy hit him like a slap. Because she was right. He was terrified. For the first time in years, he had something precious to lose. And the thought of anyone threatening his wife and unborn child brought out every protective instinct he developed during his years of isolation. But with those instincts came the old patterns. The suspicion, the rage, the need to control everything and trust no one. "The security team failed," he said coldly. "The alarm system failed. The staff failed. Everyone failed. One person failed. Miranda Sterling. Don't punish everyone else for her actions. Everyone else should have prevented her from getting this close." Selena moved closer, her hand reaching for his face with the same gentle courage she'd shown from the very beginning. And what happens when you fire all the staff? When you install more security systems? When you turn this house back into a fortress? What happens to the man I married? Have you ever been so afraid of losing something that you almost destroyed it, trying to protect it? Dorian caught her hand before it could touch him, his grip tight enough to leave marks. The man you married was weak. He let his guard down. He forgot that the world is full of people who want to hurt him. The man I married was strong enough to choose love over fear. He was brave enough to trust me when everything in his past told him not to. He was wise enough to know that hiding from life isn't the same as living it. That man almost got you killed. That man saved me from a life without meaning. And he gave me a love worth fighting for. Dorian released her hand and turned away, his shoulders rigid with tension. Miranda won't stop. She'll keep coming until she destroys us or we destroy her. Then we stop her together, as a team, as partners, not as a paranoid billionaire and his helpless wife. You're pregnant. You can't. I can't what? Think? Plan? Support my husband when he needs me most? Selena moved around to face him again. I'm pregnant, not incompetent. And this baby needs parents who solve problems together, not a father who thinks love is a weakness and a mother who's too delicate to handle reality. Dorian stared at her, seeing the fire in her eyes that had first attracted him. Even 6 months pregnant, even shaken by a direct threat to their child, she refused to be diminished or protected into helplessness. What do you suggest? We give Miranda exactly what she thinks she wants, which is a meeting with the man who destroyed her sister's life. A chance to tell Dorian Alston exactly what she thinks of him. A confrontation where she feels like she has all the power. Dorian's eyes narrowed, and then we remind her that the man who destroyed Victoria Sterling isn't the same man who married Selena Merrow. We show her what real power looks like when it's guided by love instead of revenge. That's dangerous. Everything worth having is dangerous. Our love was dangerous. This baby is dangerous. Choosing hope over fear is always dangerous. Dorian looked around the destroyed nursery. The broken furniture, the shattered glass, the bloodied note that had threatened his unborn child. The old Dorian would have turned this room into a bunker, hired an army of bodyguards, and declared war on anyone who might pose a threat. But the old Dorian had never held his wife while she slept, never felt his child kick against his palm, never experienced the terrifying and wonderful vulnerability of loving someone more than himself. All right, he said finally, we do this together. But if anything goes wrong, if she threatens you or the baby in any way, you'll protect us. I know. That's what husbands and fathers do. As Selena kissed him with the fierce tenderness of a woman who refused to let fear win, Dorian realized that Miranda Sterling had miscalculated something crucial. She thought threatening his family would make him weak. Instead, it had reminded him of exactly how strong love could make a man when he had something worth fighting for. But as they began planning their dangerous gambit to end Miranda's vendetta once and for all, neither of them knew that their enemy was already 3 steps ahead, and the trap being set was far more deadly than either of them imagined. The abandoned warehouse felt like a tomb as Dorian and Selena stepped through the rusted metal doors, their footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. Miranda Sterling stood at the center of the empty building, her resemblance to Victoria striking and disturbing. Right on time, Miranda called out, her voice carrying the same poisonous sweetness her sister had perfected. I was starting to think the great Dorian Alston had finally learned to be afraid. What do you want? Dorian asked, positioning himself slightly in front of Selena despite her earlier protests about being protected. What I want is simple.